Technology partners are the unsung growth heroes. This is Partner-Led Growth, a show dedicated to empowering partners to discover the solutions their clients need while growing their ability to take their own revenue to the next level. Your host, Ben Spector, a passionate member of the MSP community for over a decade, will help you navigate the growing partner ecosystem. Partner-Led Growth is sponsored by Zomentum, the revenue platform transforming the partner sales ecosystem, one solution, one vendor, one partner at a time.
Welcome to Partner-Led Growth, the podcast. I'm your host, Ben Spector. Now, today's guest has over 25 years of experience in risk intelligence, information management, and policy expertise across a variety of sectors. She's been appointed to congressional committees developing cyber policies, initiatives, and recommendations for the intelligence community. She's a leader in cybersecurity initiatives. She's the CEO of Cysurance. It's Kirsten Bay. Thank you very much for joining us, Kirsten.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So to get things going, the first thing I wanted to ask, I understand your expertise is in cybersecurity, but in particular, the financial risk associated with cybersecurity. So can I ask you, what is the biggest problem facing business owners thinking about the financial risks resulting from cyber attacks today?
Well, I'd say the biggest challenge really is helping understand what that really means. What are my risks as an organization? How exposed am I? Smaller organizations believe that they don't have the same level of exposure as large ones, although we see that businesses under 25 million in annual revenue are targeted and experiencing more cyber insurance claims than the large organizations. So I think it's getting alignment. I mean, when I came into this industry 15, 16 years ago, it was with its mind of valuing data for loss to help people fully understand what does that mean for us? How do we invest in the right proper security controls? How do we buy cyber insurance to mitigate and transfer that risk if we haven't invested in the right ways, or we might lose more than we think. And those are the components that are also evolving very quickly with the attacks that we see on a regular basis these days. And it's different than it was 5 years ago or even 2 years ago.
And how do we solve these problems? I would be the first to profess, I insure my car, I insure my home. I think I insured my business correctly, but I think if looking back on it, the level of insurance we had specific to cyber and the quality and appropriateness of that coverage, I think there would probably be some massive question marks over. So how do we as an industry solve those problems?
Well, it's a really great question, and it's the question we get most frequently. How much do I really need? Now, when we see claims for a lot of organizations, they are appropriately insured. We're finding they have enough insurance. We're able to remediate and take care of the situation. What's interesting is that cyber doesn't have the same correlation to revenue that other types of insurance, like general liability insurance, might have when you're insuring your business in a bricks and mortar sort of way. And so it is really thinking about how do you equate that to the operational function of your organization and your dependency on your operational digital core. So we all know that we need to send email and do other work on the internet, and not having connectivity is massively disruptive to our revenue. But there are some organizations who are more or less dependent on a moment by moment basis. E-commerce is a great example, but there are others where if you don't have the capability to continuously interact with a customer base, then you have immediate decline of revenue. And so I encourage people, when they think about what would happen if I had a loss of connectivity or inability to conduct business via online means, what is the direct revenue impact? And I feel like that also helps people really understand what's the investment I need to make, and what type of organization, like a managed service organization or an MSSP, what type of organization makes the most sense to help me build out the infrastructure, one, to have strong resilience in our infrastructure, but also then what is the risk transfer where I have to make sure that we've backstopped financially if we have some loss related to that.
So we're talking a lot here about the risk directly to the end customer. Now, our audience today will be technology partners in general. So it's MSPs, it's MSSPs, it's the VARs, it's the independent IT consultants, it's the telecoms resellers. Why should they be thinking about the risk to their end clients, or the revenue risks that their end clients are facing? How does this relate to our technology partners?
Well, when we started our company, the predominant view was that these organizations are the ones who own the infrastructure, right? So if you have someone certifying to an attestation, yes, I have multi-factor authentication, yes, I do backups. Most of these organizations are relying on these MSPs, MSSPs, and VARs and others, people who sell Microsoft licenses, with all of the goodies underneath that enable people to turn on MFA and have continuous backups. These are completely joined. And so I think it's a massive opportunity for these organizations to not only become closer related to their customer base and more strongly related from a security standpoint, but also to grow their revenue. I mean, it's service is the key portion of that word, right? Of the MSSP or MSP, and being able to grow their services revenue, I think, is an opportunity here.
So your focus in the industry at the moment is more looking at the opportunity for the technology partners rather than the risk to the technology partners. Because I've read quite a lot, in recent months, Facebook, Reddit, all of those sources, people regularly discussing the various ways the end customer's lack of insurance can come back to bite the MSP. There's things like subrogation clauses where the insurers, your end customer's insurer can come running after you as the MSP or the technology partner to reimburse them, the insurer, for the catastrophic incident. But it sounds to me like, really, rather than looking at the risk here today, you're actually more focused on the opportunity.
Yes, well, my view is with risk comes opportunity. And the fact is that either way, that risk exists, right? I mean, it's just a factor. So if the opportunity is leveraged in a way where we can support and help people grow their channel business and bring in these customers in a tighter fashion, then their ability to manage and have awareness of those risks is much better than the other way around, because we're seeing changes in policy forms right now. For example, patching requirements. And if you haven't patched within 45 days critical vulnerabilities and you have a cyber attack, you lose 25% right off the top of your coverage, and then on degrades over the number of days that you haven't patched. MSPs and MSSPs must be aware that their clients have these types of policies. If they don't have that tight relationship and understand what that means to their own liability, it's massive, right? Because you think about a lot of organizations are sandboxing those patches to make sure that they don't blow up other people's environments when they roll them out, right? So the challenge is how do we help people manage those risks and also use as an opportunity? And I think that the opportunity enables people to become stronger and more strongly aligned with their organizations that they're representing. And also it's important to know that 88% of organizations outsourced some version of their IT infrastructure. That's second only to financial services, CPAs, bookkeepers, et cetera. So it's an enormously high growth area, and more people, as we know, are outsourcing this portion of their services because they don't want to manage it on their own. It's too complex.
Yeah. So a technology partner wanting to get involved with insurance in some way. Yeah, I suspect a lot of MSPs and technology partners are thinking, we're not insurance brokers. Do we need qualifications? Are we qualified to be talking about insurance products? If I look at myself as an MSP, back a couple of years ago, I would have considered myself to be woefully underqualified to talk to people about insurance risks. Why and how do the MSPs get involved with selling or recommending cyber insurance to their clients?
I think to some degree, more or less, MSPs have been involved in that conversation for some time, simply because so many organizations don't know how to answer the questions, right? Do you have data in motion encryption or data at rest? A lot of people go, well, I don't know, do I? So they've always been involved in some way in that. And it's true. I mean, it's difficult because cyber insurance is complex even for brokers, right? So when you think about your one step removed, how am I as an MSP qualified to be able to have that conversation in a meaningful way and not increase my risk? I said something that I thought was right, but ended up not being correct. And now I've created liability for myself. And so there are a number of ways, and having partnerships with organizations that do understand insurance well and can be supportive. There are also a lot of tools available that help answer the questions, help provide explanation. And it's not so much that I think people in the MSP community need to be experts, but they have to understand the way to navigate and support their companies. And certainly we would say, don't fill out those applications for your clients. You can advise them, you can answer the questions or help them with the areas where you know that you have the technical expertise to give them the proper answer. But those things create liability, as you've said before. So it's a balancing act. And I think just having the right partnerships where one can support MSPs with the more complex questions, but there are sort of a standard set of, you need to have cyber insurance in place. We have partners who can help you if you need it. You need to be able to answer these questions in this way. And we need to implement controls in a standardized way across the board so that we know that our customers, regardless of what cyber insurance company they have, can be covered in a unified way. And there are even things down to like endpoint management solutions that only certain insurers will even accept as the right answer, right? So there are some complexities there that I think require the insurance industry and the MSP community to be more aligned.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so you launched Cysurance to enable that opportunity for the MSPs to get involved with insurance. But we've talked a bit about the risk, but if we swing it to a slightly more positive side of it, the opportunity, can you elaborate on that opportunity and how the MSPs might work with Cysurance to deliver that to the end clients?
Well, one of the things that we did was we wanted to standardize the experience that an MSP might have with product. So when we originally launched, it was the ability to bundle without licensing on our platform some type of cyber liability insurance policy. And MSPs really liked it, but the it depends answer in insurance really was a challenge to do that at any scale. And so what we found was, what's your revenue, what's your sector? There were these things that even if we tried to boundary them in a simple way, it still created too much friction for an MSP to be able to add that on a robust way to their customers. So what we developed was a product that we call our service assurance service guarantee product that actually bundles with their security solution. And what we wanted to do was provide a financial backstop where if something went wrong with one of these controls, which is possible, there's no such thing as zero anything, then certainly
I'd go beyond saying it's possible. I'll go beyond saying it's possible and say it's likely. It's an inevitability.
Right. Inevitable. But can we lower severity and impact? And what we wanted to do was take this product and bundle it with services and products that MSPs were recommending to their customer base that they believe would help protect them as well as possible. And in our belief, being cyber specialists, is that those elements of controls also help reduce severity and impact. So there could be a loss, but that loss might be 20,000, not 200,000. And so we developed this standardized single price product so that it could be easily bundled, isn't a traditional insurance product. And then that way we could, on a more strategic basis, help MSPs add cyber liability for customers who really needed to have a much more robust conversation about insurance. And then that way we have base coverage for people tied to those controls and then enable them to upsell as needed.
It sounds like it could get quite complicated for the MSP in a way that they're accepting more responsibility for the controls that the insurance is directly tied to. In my mind, and I'm imagining myself trying to squirm out of a claim somewhere, but I'm thinking, if my client's directly insured with some insurer, they're happy with the level of cover they've got. They've engaged me to maintain certain controls in terms of the security. If there's an issue on my side in terms of maintaining those controls, I feel like there's a bit of a degree of separation between me, the client, the insurer. Is there any validity to that thought pattern?
Well, I think there is. And I think it also comes back to the original comment around, does that create liability for the MSP? Because there's still going to be subrogation where an insurance company might come back and say, nope, there isn't actually an arm's length transaction here. You were responsible, but you didn't even know what that was supposed to be in relationship to that policy that that particular customer was carrying. This enables a more direct first dollar kind of coverage where we can get remediation in place very quickly or reimburse for remediation very quickly, so that it enables the MSP to be in much greater control of that experience, while then still shifting a little bit of the blame. I mean, they can white label it or still say, oh, Assurance said no, I didn't say no. So, that's one way to still kind of have that line of demarcation, but also have more control over quick remediation, quick support, and showing that if you do the right things and are willing to buy into the security stack, that we're willing to put a financial backstop behind it. So that investment will be worthwhile.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. And I think it's those subrogation clauses that definitely I find the most frightening. So if I'm understanding correctly, Assurance acts more than anything as far as the MSP in controlling their risk is concerned as the backstop on those subrogation clauses from the end customer's own insurer seeking to recover losses from the MSP or technology partner.
Right, because we really don't want to trigger that policy unless there's really a catastrophic event. And that's really where my philosophy exists, is we should treat cyber liability as much as we can as a catastrophic coverage, as opposed to, oh, well, I didn't really want to invest, so if something goes wrong, I just have insurance. And we see the hardening in the insurance market where it's harder and harder and harder to get renewals. It's harder to get new coverage in place because there is so much skepticism by the insurers now that people are doing the right things, and the requirements, some people now are seeing these applications and they were very short, and now I think every day they get at least 10 questions longer because someone thought of something. Oh, we saw a claim yesterday, we're going to add this new question in. And it's a challenge, and we can't continually look backwards when we look at cyber risk. We have to look forward, because the evolution of what attackers are going to do is what provides the greatest risk to all of us. And being in alignment there, I think, is where we can really make great strides.
Another thing I'd really like to know about is the things MSPs and technology partners should be looking out for in terms of exclusion clauses in either the policies they have protecting their own businesses or the policies their end clients have protecting their businesses. Are there any really stinking clauses you've seen over the last few years that you draw attention to, or that you think are perhaps becoming unfairly more common?
Yes, well, there are two significant ones, and they both just came out in January. One of them, and this is, I think, the most impactful for MSPs, is the widespread outage clause. And this is related to anything sort of 0-day related, software related. So if there's a massive attack, and you could think of SolarWinds as an example, or even some of the Windows Defender issues that popped up, if there's a widespread event that hits a multitude of customers, then they might be on the hook for almost all of it, right? The policy may be rendered completely useless or partially useless anyway. And so they're not allowing full coverage of their policies when those things happen. And that's a big concern for all of us. It's understandable to some degree, because it's so difficult to be able to understand what the broad risk is when we look at that type of situation. So those are being written in, and it's something that service providers really need to be aware of. The other one,
to me, sorry to cut you off there, that sounds to me a bit like the pandemic clauses that we've all seen in our travel insurance. It's just the technological alternative. These widespread outage clauses, it's the same as the pandemic clauses. Now that the pandemic is a known incident, it's generally not covered anymore. So I think what you're saying is that with the widespread outages, as soon as something becomes a known incident, a known risk, effectively it's no longer covered.
Right. And that's concerning, because obviously for those unknowns, that's why people want to have insurance. And so a lot, I think, is shifting towards that first party risk, which is things that impact you directly, right? That you clicked on the link, you did a thing, right? It's the you thing as opposed to the everybody clause. And so I think a lot of policies are really trending more towards what happens if your organization does something directly. And that also really impacts MSPs from the perspective of downstream concerns when we think about ransomware and how RMM and RDP tools have been targeted by attackers, because the one-to-many is always a way better way to ROI your attack profile, but it's really also limited MSP's ability to get the tech E&O coverage, their own coverage that they need to protect their businesses. That, or the rates have gone from $3,000 in one year to $12,000 in the next year. We're seeing increases in those rates anywhere between 100 to 300%, which is very difficult, especially when a lot of MSPs have revenues below $5 million or so. So, having a $20,000 insurance bill just to stay in business is quite onerous.
Go beyond onerous. I don't know how I'd cope with that.
Yes.
So who within the end client business would normally be thinking about the insurance risk? Our MSPs and technology partners could be having conversations with the marketing leaders and the HR leaders. I'm fairly certain this insurance doesn't fall under their remits, but who is most likely within those businesses to be thinking about insurance? Who should our partners be talking to about insurance and looking for those opportunities?
Well, generally, when I am on calls with organizations, I'm finding that it's the owner or the CEO, depending on the size of the organization, and a CTO, CIO type player as well. We have seen over the last couple of years incidents where a CRO, like a chief risk officer or a CIO, might have made a purchase and hadn't included a security team in that conversation and took, well, we'll just buy this policy, it's a little bit less expensive. And what they didn't realize they were taking out was like social engineering coverage, where if someone sent a wire, an unauthorized wire, that was declined. So it is really making sure that there is alignment to what the security posture is of the organization, because that's something we've seen a disconnect in. So that's an area to be focused on, but certainly the owner and the CEO have their own liability exposure in that conversation as well. And so they want to be in that discussion to make sure that they're getting the proper level of insurance.
Makes sense. Obviously, we've talked about the opportunity to some extent. The next question, and I'm sorry if it's a bit of a blunt one, but what is the cash opportunity there? If we had to look at a really average per user per month revenue opportunity, what does it look like? Are we talking a couple of dollars per user? Are we talking significantly more?
It's a good question. And this was the other challenge of cyber liability policies themselves, which is that sharing commission is against the law. So there are other ways like small referral fees, but you have to have a really large customer base to monetize that in a way that's effective. So it really becomes more of a strategic service play. So for us with this other product, you can mark it up 20%, and that can be significant. I mean, that can be $6 to $8 per user or per company, depending whether it's seat or endpoint charging. But it's an opportunity to layer a piece into that security stack that's relatively inexpensive from our costing perspective, but enables the MSP to garner additional $2, $3, $4 perhaps per user or per seat, which can be significant over the course of the year. And these are things, it's interesting. I hear some people say, yeah, I don't feel right about making money off of an insurance product. That just doesn't feel right to me. Some just offer it as a benefit because they're trying to use it as sort of a marketing / benefit to their customer to differentiate their services. Others see it as an opportunity to add it to a broader security stack and then add a little bit of margin into it so that they can recoup some of those costs as well.
You're obviously in the US, to anyone who couldn't tell from the accent. As far as I know, in the UK, the whole process of selling insurance or being a broker requires quite a significant level of regulatory control. You need to be registered and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, for example. Are there similar controls in the US that would make this difficult or impossible for some small MSPs to be able to sell?
Well, what we have done is had that product reviewed in the EU, UK, Canada, and other jurisdictions around the world to ensure that the wording is in alignment with the being outside the regulation of insurance so that we can have it bundled regardless of location. Because yes, we face similar challenges. It's interesting, in other jurisdictions, sharing commission isn't a big deal. In the US, it's a very big deal. And so what we've tried is to look at is the variety of different challenges that one might have in these jurisdictions. In some jurisdictions, we changed the wording slightly so that it would fit more nicely into their bundle in that land as opposed to in the US, so that we can have it really sit in right alignment to how it should fit in with the jurisdictional regulations.
So am I to understand that the Cysurance products are available outside of the US?
Yes.
Now that I didn't know.
Mhm.
Okay, so an MSP in the UK, and sorry to bring it back to the UK, but it's obviously the market I know the best. They don't need to be FCA regulated. They don't need to be registered as any kind of broker or lender, anything like that. They can quite literally just sell it as they would any other SaaS licenses. It just gives them this massive degree of protection from the risk, the financial risk to both themselves and their end clients, and obviously uncovers this significant opportunity.
That's correct, because we structure as a risk service. And so because we have a service associated with that backstop in terms of analyzing the products that are in the stack, offering services around analyzing the different programs, customers, et cetera, that are in their particular customer base, that enables us to then provide that service to them, and then they can bundle it in. And so we worked a lot with legal to manage all of the variety. It's like the EU is very much like the US. Every state in the US is regulated separately, like every country is regulated separately. So we tried to make sure there was good alignment in that. And again, for that standardization, because we really find that standardization of insurance product across the board is the thing that is the most challenging for people. And it also means that it's challenging for MSPs to get their arms around what are the right controls for their customers, because we see a variety of different carriers who will decline a policy for things that, as a person who understands technology and security, I look at them and go, yeah, like everybody under the sun has this vulnerability potentially, like spoofing. Why would that all of a sudden be called out in this one particular organization, but not for others? So I think MSPs, and I've talked to many who are very frustrated by this arbitrary nature of what might flag a particular account to be declined or not. And so that for us has been a big focus, is how do we get uniformity to allow them to have some standardization as well. The last thing you want is an insurance authority knocking on your door telling you you've done something wrong, because they can be very mean. And it really is about this service concept. And I think it aligns nicely with the MSP and how they send product to their customer, because really how they're generating their revenue is obviously through services. And so the ability to have to look at the variety of products that are in their stack, to say, we're going to provide a risk service to analyze what those things are, to even allow their customers to risk score so that they can do a risk score for that customer base. These are different services that we provide inside our platform that enable them to bundle that without concern of being an insurance product. And that's really the marked difference. So it's just something worth calling out, because it is probably where we spend the most time on that topic. And then the other would be, how do I do this, right? How do most people send this out to market? Because I think we've gotten better over time, making it more normalized in the marketplace in terms of fitting it into a product stack. But it's, how do I sell it? How do I market it? And I really think that for that, it's bundling, right? The not doing it by line item. And I think especially with security products and distribution of products, I see more and more MSPs aligning to an entire stack versus line iteming or a la carte different products. And I think that when we see the most success in our program is when we see that it's done where, if you're buying a multi-year contract with a full stack, where it's providing a particular benefit for rewarding that customer for making a security decision that's broad as opposed to a la carte, that's really where we're seeing people get the most traction with the solution.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, the bundling piece actually, and how you take it to the customer, because I think that the kind of cost point you've alluded to earlier it's one of those things where it's arguably worth not swallowing it, but bundling it in such a way that you're not necessarily making a massive amount of profit on the service, but by lowering your own risk, lowering your own insurance overheads that you as an MSP have, there's got to be some benefit to it. And the bundling thing, I think, is an interesting one, because there's a lot of great sales and marketing coaches out there at the moment that are talking more and more about bundling. It's hardly new, but I think we've now got to a point where even mediocre MSPs have worked out how to bundle their services together. One example, I've told the story before, so I'm sorry to anyone that might be hearing it again. My partner and I were refurbishing our apartment recently, and we invited two curtain suppliers to come in and quote for the job. One of them effectively showed us some pictures and said, this is what you need, it's going to look fabulous, and this is how much it's going to cost. And the other supplier started asking questions about whether we wanted the curtains lined or interlined, or what drop we wanted. And I'm thinking, I don't even understand. I don't know what lining is. I don't care what lining is. I just want them to look fabulous. And I certainly don't care what the drop is. So you can imagine, by making the sales process for us much, much easier, and just by saying, this is what you need, it's going to do what you want, it's going to look great, and this is how much it costs. Not surprisingly, that was the option we took. And I think there's a lot to be said for applying the same logic to the technology sales process. We're talking about products and services that a lot of clients don't understand. They don't want to understand. They don't need to understand. So the simpler we can make it, the more we can bundle these things together. And I think you're right that, the proposition you talked about here with the Cysurance product is that by bundling it with your cybersecurity stack, the stack is aligned to what the insurance product requires you to have. The insurance is aligned to the stack, and the stack's aligned to the insurance. So it just makes sense to be able to add that massive clincher by saying that not only do we technologically remove your risk, but we're also going to financially remove. I've got to be careful probably about saying we are going to financially remove your risk, because that's the kind of thing that gets you shot. But we're going to do our best to minimize that risk for you.
Absolutely. And I know that there has been reticence to ask for more from a customer, to try and get more money, that there's an anxiety about that. It's a challenge to try to, hey, we're raising our prices. And I've had a lot of discussions with people who advise MSPs and say, look, you need to raise your prices at least 1 or 2, 4% a year, just to align them to the fact that things end up costing more, and that it's not a shock when for 5 years nothing's changed and all of a sudden you start changing those things. But I think it's 100% correct around security products in particular. They don't know. And there's enough anxiety now that I don't think there should be reticence to say, look, this is how much the stack costs. And with it come these things. And it's what you need to be secure. And again, I think part of it too is to not be afraid to say, that doesn't mean you're like never going to have something bad happen. What it means is that you're resilient, and it's always about severity and impact. Because I've had some people say to me, well, by introducing this, aren't you sort of implying that my services aren't good and that something bad might happen to them? And it's like, something bad can happen walking across the street. But I think it's aligning expectations appropriately. And the thing is that I just don't want these things to happen. But if they do happen, we have a managed SOC that we run our own services in. And we recently had a contractor come in to help us with some connections in our APIs. And we got all these security alerts all over the place. Someone's been coming in from an IP address that's unrecognized. And we were like, oh, thank goodness it works, right? Because it recognized that these people shouldn't and ordinarily weren't in our organization. And it's good to be able to know that our system was working. And because then we can react to it. And the moat concept that we had, the walled garden that we looked at even 5-6 years ago, it's important. We need a moat, but there are other things that we need to do to make sure that we can recover quickly. And these are the areas that we need to be better at educating our customers about.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. We've obviously wandered on slightly, started talking about sales and the approach to sales. Probably a good opportunity to mention that the podcast sponsored by Zementum, which is a sales and revenue platform. So, Kirsten, can you tell me about your most memorable sale?
Gosh, ever?
Yeah. I've had some very entertaining stories in response to this question, so the pressure is on.
Yes, well, I would say I was selling a very large Fortune 50 company in threat intelligence, actually, and we saw that they had compromises in their organization, so we started selling them on additional services. But when you call them back and you say, well, we actually just saw that this other organization has fully penetrated and we understand exactly what's about to happen to you and you need to take your systems offline. And they're like, you're just trying to sell us on stuff. And it's like, no, really, it's like really happening. And so like when you're right in the middle trying to close this big deal, and also there's this active penetration starting to occur, and navigating between legal and everyone being really mad at you. I think I've spent more time with people being mad at me in these situations. But it was quite a harrowing experience, but we learned a lot because it allows you to figure out how to politically navigate between all of these organizations and how to tell someone whose job it was to protect the organization that they didn't know this bad thing was about to occur. We still got the deal, but it was tenuous. It was a little nerve-wracking. Many like sleepless nights, 2 a.m, talking to legal counsel and others, trying to hold everything together and still get them support.
How do you think you clarified to the client that this was, your service was going to be a really great choice for them?
Well, especially as it relates to threat intelligence type solutions, the thing is that we know things about what's happening in places that you don't, and you're hiring us to source intelligence to protect your organization. So when you're able to prove that right in the middle of the sales cycle, that's good. But on the other hand, and this is something that MSPs also are facing a lot, which is when you have to tell people things when they've gone wrong, does that, what's the political navigation? Because you were supposed to be able to do something to protect them, or the security team or the CISO or someone was supposed to be doing certain things. And it's viewed as a failure, either by themselves or by the organization. And so it's how do you help that organization navigate through that political discussion as much as anything, in terms of being able to get comfort with, it's not because we are incompetent in any way, it's because the adversaries are that good. And we're here to help you with they're that good.
And I think that is definitely a story that our MSPs need to be spinning when they're talking to their clients. It doesn't really matter how big or how small. It is really the same story you need to articulate, isn't it?
It is, because, and I think especially with cyber, we live in this weird gap space where on the one hand, it's diminished in its importance. Like if you have a credit card and the credit card company will say, don't you worry, we'll cover any bad things that happen. If someone has an unauthorized charge, we'll just wipe it clean. As if like none of us pay for those events happening. Some money got somewhere, it wasn't recovered, and we do pay for it, right? But we're made to feel like we don't, so it must not be that important. On the other hand, when it comes to enterprise security, nothing ever should happen. And if it does, then bad things are going to happen. And it's just not true. Houses burn down, cars crash, hurricanes happen, and so do cyber events. And the adversary is becoming more sophisticated, but also we have the ability to, again, reduce severity and impact. And I think that's the conversation, is we are here to help you recover. We're here to help you be protected as much as possible. But this expectation that it will never occur is just dangerous to all of us. And it's balancing between the sky is falling in, don't you worry about it. So that's the...
What's exciting you most about the future of our industry?
Well, I came into cybersecurity not as a technology person, as a security person originally. I came in as a risk person. And my mission really was to help align the risk discussion with the technology discussion. And I think that with the hardness of this insurance market and the challenge of getting insurance, we're in the place where we can all get a lot better. And as it's sort of a worn out statement, but security is a team sport. And I think that that's the thing I'm excited about is how we get alignment and work together to help provide a solution that only helps end customers be protected and get recovery and protect all of us, but also that we recognize that we are all equally impacted, that we are all equally at risk, and that shared vulnerability is the key to getting control out of some of these things that feel very infinite in terms of their danger.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Kirsten. I think that's a great positive note to leave it on after a long discussion about the crippling risks of cyber insurance for our MSPs. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you afterwards?
Cysurance.com. Just take a look and all of our contact information is there, and we'd love to help have a conversation and figure out what we can do.
Brilliant. And presumably on LinkedIn, Twitter, if they want to find you there?
LinkedIn as well. Kirsten Bay.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for joining us, Kirsten.
Thank you. Such a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. If you want to get more from today's show, check out the show notes and share this episode with a friend. Earn, grow, and manage revenue quickly and cost effectively in the Zomentum Revenue Platform. To learn more, check out zomentum.com. See you in the next episode.